So I think you can all see it. Whenever Chief Jim Hopper attacks, investigate once for each non-token attacking creature. So attack with him, 4 other, and boom, you have 5 clues, which is the magic count to win the game with the time sieve. Tap it, sacrifice 5 artifacts, take an extra turn. In order to get the colors we need for time sieve, we need 11 the mage. She isn't really there for anything besides color identity and, well, giving you a card draw whenever she attacks. Also, maximum hand size is 11, that's kinda cool. Also, being able to cast a card for free if you have 11 cards in your hand or more, that's like never gonna happen. I've seen decks where they're more focused towards 11 more than Chief Jim Hopper, and they rarely achieve that. But hey, it's a decent partner commander for Chief Jim Hopper with a card on it, so she's fine. But the main focus is to cast Jim. If you have mana over, you get 11 into play. But we're not gonna have that much time for 11 because we're gonna use our mana to crack clues, to draw cards into more value, eventually finding time sieve, but also casting cheaper, more importantly, stax hate bear creatures. You see, we need to be able to interact with our opponents. So hate bears will fulfill 2 criteria for this deck. The first one, pretty obvious, being creatures. We don't really care what they are, as long as they are creatures, you will create clues. And second, you're interacting and making sure you don't lose the game to your scary opponents. And this ultimately means we're a form of mid-range deck. But here comes an ultimate truth to all hate bear decks, or well, all forms of stack decks, or decks that kind of wins slower compared to all other decks, is that you have to adapt what form of hate bears you include inside your 99. There are some that it's always gonna be good. For example, Dolphy Voidwalker will pretty much always be pretty decent. Ranger Captain will also be quite good, but Laviniasaurus Renegade and Archon of Emeria, those could change in power level. When it comes to creatures that you could potentially include, you have a lot of different options. The simple truth is that the creatures you should include inside this deck will always vary depending on what people are doing inside this format. And sometimes you should include value creatures. These creatures don't really interact with your opponents, or well, Ragavan and Robber of the Rich could accidentally exile a combo piece from one of your opponents top of the library. That would be great, but they're basically there for value. Ragavan might be must-have auto-included in this deck basically because Ragavan is still really good, but when he connects, he creates a treasure, so he will count as 2 creatures for your time sieve combo. Another thing to consider is, should we be on Thassa's Oracle Consult? Now, we are on the color identities for it, and it's a straightforward, very clean and simple combo that don't require that much mana. And we're able to draw a lot of cards, and it's easy to just auto-include through this one in. But another pathway you could go, and I'm not saying which one is the correct one here, it's basically up to you what you think is better, but you could go anti-ETB creatures, for example, Hushwing Griff with Flash, that is instant speed interaction, by the way. So if someone is resolving Thassa's Oracle, you can interact in instant speed with a Hushwing Griff from your hand, mysteriously. So either you include the 2-card combo Thassa's Oracle Consult, great card combo, or you go for the entire anti-ETB package. As always, link in the description below of the video for a deck list, and I've chosen the anti-ETB creatures, but I don't see a problem doing the other decision here. However, I should also add that you could include both, because there aren't always going to be a scenario where you have your Hushwing Griff in your hand and you might run into a pod where you don't really need to put that creature into play, depending on what your opponents are up to. But honestly, there's a lot of different ETB creatures that people play these days, so anti-ETB hate bear creatures absolutely make sense. And here's the cool part, we can win through anti-ETB. We don't need to ETB anything, time sieve is just tap and sacrifice. However, please remember, don't include Stony Silence inside this deck though, we can't win through that. But ultimately, when you're sitting down building this kind of deck, you're usually building a 150 card deck with 50 cards that go in and out, depending on what you feel like. And I honestly like that. That means that you can build this deck in a lot of different variations of ways. You don't need to follow my deck list. You can look at it for inspiration, but then go your own crazy pathway. You could even include Venota Joiner of Forces inside the 99 to help you burst creatures into play. Like the creature count you're gonna have inside the deck, the amount of creatures could vary depending on a lot of things as well too. For example, I have a deck called cEDH 5 colors please don't board wipe that did play 60 creatures in it. It was a crazy hate bear deck and I loved it. The reason I went for 60 creatures was because people were a bit greedy. They had cut board wipes. They were no longer playing Cyclonic Rift and Toxic Delusion such. So for a time being I wanted to exploit that and added a lot of creatures. But I no longer play that. I play a cEDH combo lock deck these days that is going for 37 creatures. But I think that's a good example to showcase the thought process you should have when you're deciding for the creature count and what creatures to include. Because there's a lot of really cool strange techs that we can do. For example, Legacy's Allure. That is an interaction spell that will steal a creature from one of your opponent. This is increasing your creature count, which is what we need. It's basically a creature, but it's a form of spot removal. A bit slow one, but actually quite playable. But whatever you do, don't forget that you're on the color identity of blue. You have universal answers in counter spells, and they are key in helping you survive the potential speed of others. But you should have a thought about the ones you do include. For example, Swan Song, a great counter spell. However, you're giving away a 2/2 flying creature. That isn't usually a problem, but this is a deck that absolutely wanna attack. Like, blockers interact with this combo, which means that spot removal for creatures might be quite important, and preferably free to cast or really cheap to cast. One that I would like to highlight a little bit extra is Drown in the Lock, which is both a counterspell and a creature spot removal. Now, it's not really gonna interact with an early ad nauseum because the CMC of that spell compared to their graveyard size isn't like good enough for you to make this work, but still a great card overall. However, you can go a little bit crazy like me. I can't resist having a Valakut inside the deck. Don't include this. I'm doing it because I'm crazy and I'm me, and I kinda make it work. This is the reason why there's no command tower in the deck list in the description below for the video, and why there are so many mountains inside the mana base as well, and why there's a huge push towards red cards inside the deck. But what this ultimately does is transform all your mountains into lightning bolts after the 5th one against your opponent's blockers, which means that on land 7 you will have your first lightning bolt, and that's kind of slow, especially in a deck that don't contains green. However, we're playing a mid-range deck that delays the game, so you can actually get to that land count. So instead of being strange and weird like me, let's be efficient. Here's Fire Covenant for you, which will board wipe your opponent's creatures to the amount of life you want to pay for it. So you're getting rid of all your opponent's blockers, or the ones you need to get rid of, your opponent's combo creatures, your opponent's stacks creatures, or some of their card draw value engines as well, but you keep your own board state for a really low CMC cost of only 3 mana. Can be cast in instant speed as well. We should also obviously talk about the potential inclusion of creatures that will synergize with a time sieve strategy, like Silas Wren, Seeker Adept. So he is a creature that will generate clues when he attacks with Jim, but also when he connects you may cast artifacts from your graveyard. He fits perfectly inside the concept, but there is a problem. It demands that you build your deck a lot accordingly to that, which you could do. But the thing with only including hate bears makes the deck very clean and very straightforward, and it gets it to the point. Cast Jim, cast hate bears, make your opponents unable to win the game with your hate bears, draw cards by attacking with creatures, generating clues, eventually cast time sieve when you have the critical mass of creatures, and go infinite. And it's very easy to build your deck towards that, but if you're including things like Silas Wren, Emery, and Lurus of the Dream Den is also great examples here. You sacrifice your mana rocks into time sieve, and you use these creatures to reanimate artifacts that you sacrifice time sieve. You can even sacrifice time sieve here, by the way, and recast it with Lurus. But it really will put a lot of deck construction demand on your deck going for this. Like, you need to include a lot of artifacts that you might want to sacrifice that you could recast from the graveyard here. You could absolutely do that. I don't see a problem with it at all. Remember what I said in the beginning of the video, this deck could be built in a lot of different variations of ways. I should mention that I do have Lurus inside the 99 because he can cast hate bears. He can recast and rebuild time sieve here, but also like Draenei Magistrate, Thalia and such. Those creatures are great. You want to regain them now and then. He's basically a form of very strange card draw mechanic, or card value, rebuild potential, as well as just being a random creature for Jim to create clues. But this actually showcases a good example of why Emry Lurker of Lock isn't that good for this deck, because you can tap it and cast an artifact from your graveyard. For example, you can sacrifice Time Sieve and then recast Time Sieve by tapping Emry. However, you might as well attack with Emry as well, and that will generate a clue. So Emry is not really needed for this deck in that regard. It's good if your opponent has a lot of blockers, but then you can just replace Emry with a bigger creature, a creature that's more capable of attacking, a creature with hate bear effects instead. One more thing, I currently have Ad Nauseam inside this deck for its card draw capabilities. Now normally when you solve this you win the match. We don't. We just draw a lot of cards with it. And well, you gotta have a big spell for 11 to resolve, right? Hope you liked the video, guys, that it inspired you in some form of cool way. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. See you later, guys.